Metadata. What is it and why does the government want it?
And are smartwatches really that smart? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined by a man who unfortunately misunderstood what IP address meant and now has to clean up the bathroom, Adam Turner. Adam, what's happening in tech news?
There are fears that Australia's community television networks may lose their digital spectrum after 2015 and be pushed across to the internet. Currently, they're using spectrum which is earmarked for a sixth commercial network, and a decision on the issue is expected from Communications Minister Malcolm Turnbull by October.
The ABC's announced that it's going to simulcast the first episode of the next season of Doctor Who at the same time as it airs in the UK. That does mean an early start if you want to watch it early, but it also removes a lot of the traditional barriers that are used as excuses for piracy. It's a bit of a pity, though, that a pre-production version of that episode leaked online a little while ago.
20th Century Fox has extended its early release movie program to Australia, offering movies for sale as a digital download several weeks before they're available on DVD or Blu-ray. Australian retailers on board include EasyFlix, Google and Apple.
Telstra's made changes to its prepaid mobile plans, dropping Encore Plus in favour of Freedom. But Freedom isn't exactly all that free. Right at the moment, if you're on a new Freedom plan, you can get certain unlimited calling perks, but you can't use any of your credit to buy data top-ups. You've got to wonder in this day and age whether or not that's something that the consumer wants or it's something that Telstra wants. Adam, the government's made a lot of noise recently about metadata collection. Now, what is metadata? Should we really be fussed about it?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a question, unfortunately, that most of our politicians can't answer. And that's what created this problem. Tony Abbott came out and made a mess of it. Attorney General George Brandis made it even worse. Malcolm Turnbull did a pretty good job of explaining it, and then the head of ASIO and the Australian Federal Police had to come out and call a press conference to explain it to everybody. Now, the head of ASIO doesn't exactly crave the limelight. I'm sure this guy was thrilled about the fact that he had to get up in front of the national media and clean up the mess made by people selling policies that they don't understand. Now, metadata, there's a cliche that explains it, but it explains it really well on a basic level. Metadata, it's data about your data rather than the actual content. So if you think about it, if you send a letter to somebody in the post, the metadata is what's written on the envelope. The actual content is the letter. What they want is the permission to read all your metadata, but not necessarily read the letter. If they want to read the letter, they still need a warrant, but they want to access all that metadata. Now,
and I believe they also want to make it mandatory for ISPs to hold it for a lot longer than they currently might.
That's the thing. This thing kind of already happens, and it doesn't, obviously, it's not just paper letters. We're talking about phone calls, email, what you do online. And at the moment, telcos keep this stuff, but it's a bit haphazard. Every telco does a different approach on what they keep and how long they keep it. And so the government already has access to it, and they've used it a few times with things. Counter-terrorism stuff, a few big crimes. They helped track down the perpetrators by pinning them down with their metadata. But the problem that the law enforcement and security people say that they have is that sometimes they go to people and they don't have the metadata that they hoped they would have. So they basically just want to make it uniform across the board. The thing that people are already sort of doing on a haphazard basis, they would like them to do that officially. Now, they don't need a warrant now to see that metadata, and they still won't need a warrant under the new system to see the metadata. So all that's really changing, if you believe what they're telling us, is that every telco will have to keep the same kind of metadata for 2 years to make it easier for these people to find what they want, rather than sort of the hodgepodge mess that we seem to have now.
I think the other problem, though, is, and you alluded to this in the intro, is that the government's done a poor job of explaining the policy. And I mean, even Malcolm Turnbull, who gets technical things in a broad sense, has essentially kind of come out and said, well, look, actually, this is still a policy that's in development. They haven't exactly said what it is they want to collect. They have certainly said, look, we want a uniform way for ISPs to collect it. We want it kept for a set period of time to aid in counter-terrorism as an example. But that's what they've thrown up as an example. I don't think there's too many people that would argue against genuine counter-terrorism dealings. The issue is, though, I think, that this actually strikes a little bit more fundamentally at a right to privacy online. And I mean, that's something certainly that I believe we should have. In fact, I think it's quite vital in the digital age that, in fact, we have more privacy, not less. What do you reckon?
Now, see, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, because most people say, well, privacy's dead anyway. Who cares about privacy? I don't care if the police know that I rang my girlfriend yesterday or if I read the Age newspaper online last night. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that is the point that a lot of people make. But I think to just look at it as a privacy issue is to miss the big picture, because what the big picture here is, once you give them access to this, how are they going to abuse it, and then what are they going to want to do next?
Well, it's not just a question of how they're going to abuse it, to interrupt you, it's also a question of who's going to abuse it.
Yes,
once this data is collected, is it just a question of ASIO saying, right, counter-terrorism, nothing else? Is it then, for example, potentially going to be passed on, because obviously in an internet age, a lot of IP addresses, your personal IP address, they seem to be shying away from the idea that they'll collect website IP addresses that you'll visit, but that's still very muddy. Depends which politician you're talking to. Yeah. And as I've said, the policy is still under development. But once this data is kind of there, who's going to have access to it? How is it going to be policed? And again, look, I actually do think it comes down to this privacy thing. I do think privacy is the big picture here. The common argument, and I know what you mean, people kind of go, well, we give this stuff away, and if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about, this kind of thing. Well, actually, except that what you've got to hide might be completely different from what someone else has got to hide. If you're applying for health insurance and you've suddenly had to call the cancer clinic 15 times in a day, and your health insurance company finds out about this, well, what does that mean? What does it mean if you're calling the VD clinic a lot but not calling your wife all that much? There's all sorts of these areas where the metadata can actually tell you fundamentally about the data within because of where it's going, depending on what's collected. That, I think, is a straight up privacy issue.
I totally agree with that, but I don't think it's as likely that your health insurance company is going to get access to that metadata. They're going to have a pretty hard time explaining that it's in any way a law enforcement or security issue. What I'm more concerned about is not so much the privacy, but then how the law enforcement and the security people, the ASIO basically, use it to look for other things. Today you're looking for terrorists, tomorrow you're looking for political activists, the day after you're looking for whistleblowers, and then we slowly turn into this sort of police state where they can just go looking for anybody they want. So it's not that people, it's privacy, but it's bigger than that. It's about government abusing its power. I'm not worried about third-party entities like my health insurance company seeing this data. I think that's less likely. I'm worried
about everyone seeing this data. And I'm fine to differ with you on that, but I'm worried about everyone seeing this data. But I agree with you that the political dissonance thing is another excellent angle, because there's all sorts of areas where you could be breaking a law, and there's all sorts of laws, in fact, in Australia, they get broken all the time. You could be breaking a law, big or small, or as an act of civil disobedience.
Yes.
And acts of civil disobedience are great for changing unjust laws. Without acts of civil disobedience, women wouldn't have the vote. Aboriginal people wouldn't have the vote. There's all sorts of areas where, at certain times in history, it has been illegal to do a thing. The metadata could point to you doing that thing that may be a perfectly justifiable act of civil disobedience. And especially in the current climate, where in fact we have an incumbent government who seems hell-bent on telling us as little as possible about what they're doing.
Yeah, don't
the
you worry,
operational
head about
matters comes to mind here.
Yeah, you just let me worry about that.
I think it's extremely troubling that they're saying, well, actually, we want more data and we want frameworks for this data and we want all this data stored. That, I think, is a serious concern, and in some ways the fact that they're actually so massively idiotic about it might be a breath of fresh air, because it might mean that the whole thing falls over because they don't understand it.
The scariest thing is that people like the Prime Minister and the Attorney General are happy to hand these powers to ASIO, but they don't understand the powers that they're handing them. That's what scares me the most. They're happy to sign off on things they don't understand and probably can't reverse later. If you're going to make decisions like this, you at least need to have a vague idea of what you're talking about. So, Alex, you're a man who likes his smartwatches, but is it really a smart move to buy a smartwatch right now?
I'm not 100% convinced that it is for everyone. Now, apologies to all the smartwatch vendors out there, because I'm sure you'd love to sell millions of the things. And look, I'm a man who does love a smartwatch. Right now, purely for visual effect, I'm actually wearing two of them, and whilst that's a bit silly,
that's double smart.
Yeah, well, look, I'm a genius, obviously. And a genius who looks like he's fallen out of a bad 1980s sci-fi flick. But that aside, I think...
need backup. We need backup.
Exactly. I think right at the moment, the market is still fairly niche, and there's a couple of simple reasons for that. Because right now, we're still, even though smartwatches have been around for a bit, we're still really talking early generation hardware. For a lot of these manufacturers, it still is first generation. So, I mean, on my wrist at the moment, I've got a Kickstarter version of the Pebble, and yes, they've gone second gen with the Pebble Steel, but fundamentally it's the same thing underneath. And I've got LG's G-Watch, which is their first Android Wear device. And they're nice and they're functional within certain kind of characteristics for notifications and a small amount of control and searching. But the capabilities are still small, they're still they're niche little plays for people who really kind of need that information. And I think this gets to the heart of why you should buy any given technology. It should fulfill a purpose. It should do something that you need it to do. And right now, I'm not sure that a smartwatch at $200, $250 does enough that pulling a phone out of your pants pocket doesn't do.
That's the thing for me, because I've got my phone on me all the time, and it's not such an inconvenience to pull the phone out of my pocket. I'm struggling to see the value in a smartwatch. I've been playing around with fitness bands like the Fitbit Flex, and again, there's things that it can do, but the phone in my pocket can do a lot of that stuff as well. And it's like, what am I paying, $130 for a Flex for to maybe get off my butt and be more active, when I could put that money towards a new pair of runners or a new bike or a treadmill or something that would actually help be a bit more practical. So you've got to figure out where they fit into the big picture. And like you said, if you're going to spend $130 on the Fitbit, it's like, well, do I step up to the smartwatch, or do I step down to the dumb watch and then spend that money on a gym membership? You really need to sort of figure out what your needs are and how it fits in.
An astonishing number of gym memberships, of course, don't get used. So
yes, that's true.
That's a great investment.
But how many Fitbits don't get used after a while?
Well, you see,
I wore one for a week and I felt like I was
use
under
an
house
exercise
arrest.
band quite a lot of the time because I really got into the kind of maths of it and the numbers, and that actually did incentivise me to walk more and to get more fit. Yeah. That's actually been a big
So the Sheldon effect kicked in.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a geek. If people don't know that, sorry. But... The jump up to the smartwatch does have some cases where it works. If you are a bit of an information junkie, getting this stuff to your watch can be quite useful. I find I use it in a limited capability when I'm driving quite a bit, because if a message gets flicked to my phone and it's buzzing in my pocket, I'm kind of thinking while I'm driving, oh geez, is that something I've got to deal with right now? If I can glance at my watch, and as far as I'm legally aware, I am allowed to glance at a watch while driving. I don't think that breaks any road rules, but I'm not a lawyer. Don't quote me on that one. If I can look at it on my watch, I can immediately go, oh, right, okay, yeah, that's just a piece of email that I can wait till later, or, oh, right, I'd better rush to the hospital because something terrible's happened. So there's there are usage cases for them, and it is still evolving. But right now, it is still in that early space. And I mean, there are problems of compatibility because, I mean, Samsung's got its whole range of watches which only work with its phones. And there's it doesn't take a genius
Straight away, that rings alarm bells. When
it doesn't take a genius to suggest that when and if Apple launches an iWatch of some sort, it's probably only going to work with iOS devices. Right now as well, I have a preference, I've got to admit, for the Pebble on my wrist over the LG G-Watch for one simple reason, and that's battery life. The Pebble lasts for about 4 or 5 days. The LG, and a lot of its contemporaries, it's not just this, lasts maybe day and a half. And for a watch, that's a bit painful. You have to remember to charge this thing overnight.
Does it have wireless charging or something like that? Because you want to basically, if I had a watch that wanted to be charged every day, I want to sit it on a nightstand. Wireless charge.
It has a stand, and if you remember to do it, it's great. It's not a drama at all, and you might not even notice it. But as soon as you don't, you could be in quite serious trouble because suddenly you don't have you've just got a lump of plastic on your wrist, and that's that's perhaps not great for a $250 supposedly smart watch. And as I say, the vast majority of the colour screen smartwatches do this. LG's does it. I haven't had a chance to test Samsung's, but it's actually got a smaller battery, so I'm not hopeful. And obviously I haven't had a chance to test Motorola's yet. And nobody outside Cupertino's tested whatever the iWatch will be, but hopefully it'll be a little bit better as well. But right now, if you're really kind of geeky and you like the tech and you really, really need your information quickly, whatever it might be,
and the money's burning a hole in your pocket,
then they're fine. But for the mass audience, I still think we're maybe a generation or two away from where they really start kind of picking it up and being a real must-buy kind of item.
It's kind of like the first generation Android was at the HTC Dream. It was a very interesting concept, but there's no way in hell I would have bought one. It was 2 or 3 models in. I think the Desire was at the point where I went, yeah.
The Desire was the Android sweet spot, and
it was the tipping
point, we need the desirable cha-ching smartwatch. Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. And if anyone wants some of my metadata, for the record, my name is Santos L. Halper.
And I'm Alex Kidman. 123 Credibility Street.